What's going on, everybody? My name is Ronnie Withager, and I'm a CPA. And I am going to take a little bit of time and talk to you today about deadlines and penalties and how we can avoid them. So, with the deadline coming up on July 15th, it's kind of weird to say that, but this year that's our deadline. I just figured I wanted to break down a couple things, talk to you guys about extensions, talk to you about extension calculations and why they're important, and talk about the types of penalties that you could accrue and how to avoid those penalties. So as I've been working with you guys, I think most of us have a grasp on a lot of this stuff, and it might seem like something that you already kind of have a pretty good idea of how to work with, but I definitely have every single year where there's at least one person who said, I really had no idea about these penalties, and now I'm in kind of a crappy situation. So with a holiday weekend here, I'm not really going to beat around the bush. I'm just going to get into it and try to get you guys some good information. All right, so for 2019, I just wanted to kind of give you a little breakdown of what the deadlines are and how we can file extensions. So business tax deadlines, they remained unchanged. So for my client base, we filed extensions back on March 15th, and partnerships and S corps are extended out to September 15th right now. There's no changes to those deadlines. We're still on track with that. If you have a C corporation, your deadlines depend on your year end. So April, July, September, and January are deadlines without extension on those. If you do file extensions, all those dates change. So I don't really summarize it all out, but it depends on what your year end is on the C Corp, but if you have a partnership or an S Corp, it's same as always. All right, we'll be gearing up over the next month or two, really getting those September deadline businesses done. So just wanted to give you a little update on the business. That's kind of status quo. But the personal tax deadline, as you guys are aware of, the Trump admin extended the deadline to July 15th. Now, there still is an opportunity to get a regular extension that would be available to October 15th, and there's a good chunk of people who are still going to do that like they usually do. And so, there have been some discussion on whether the administration was going to automatically extend the July 15th deadline to September or October, but from what I'm reading, there's not going to be an automatic extension. So because there's not going to be an automatic extension, there's going to be a little work on our end to go through and make sure that we get those extensions filed for you, and we'll be doing that over the next 10 days. So if you're listening to this and you're a little concerned and you just want to make sure that you are going to get an extension, you want to reach out to me and shoot me an email, that's totally fine. I can confirm to you that the extension's made. All right, so what ends up happening though, when you file an extension, you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to make a payment with your extension, because even though you're filing an extension, you don't really get an extension of time to pay your tax. Whatever tax you're going to owe on your return is going to be due July 15th. If you file an extension, you get an extra 3 months to file, but you don't get extra time to pay. And so, when it comes to extension time, there's definitely going to be a contingency of clients that are like, just file me an extension, I'm good. I'll talk to you in, August, September, October. But then there's another group of people that are like, hey, I know I owe a tax balance, so I'm going to need to make a payment with my extension. So what we'll do is we'll do an extension calculation. And you might say, well, what is an extension calculation? It's going to be an opportunity where I kind of get an idea of what your tax balance is going to be, and then we'll put together a form that we send in and a check that we send in to the IRS. And so, I want to make sure that we hit that number. So I do these calculations to make sure that we could do a projection of that total tax due. So what we'll do is we'll hop on the phone, or I'll have you send me your information, and we'll go through and we'll enter everything into the software that we know for sure. Now, some of you guys are going to be waiting on K1 still and different things like that. And so there's going to be some items that we don't really know all the information, so we'll estimate the other items. So we go through and just get a pretty good idea of what your total tax due. If we go through and do that full calculation and you're getting a refund, then we extend the return and you don't really have to have any worries. If you end up owing tax, then we make a payment and again, you don't really have to worry, right? You just make the payment and then we file when we file and when we have everything. The other option would be, you know that you're going to owe, but you need to save up the money, and so you'll wait to pay. I'll get into, what happens when you wait to pay with penalties here in a minute. If you are going to make a payment with your extension, you could do it online, or we could file in Form 4868. And I'm going to show you that form right now. This is the extension voucher. It's really kind of a simple thing. For a lot of people, you may not be familiar with this because a lot of times I just electronically file your extension for you. And that's what 99% of people do. But if you're in that situation where you need to make a payment, you might actually want to print out this voucher right here, and we fill it in and put in the amount that you're going to be paying, so that the IRS can kind of cash your check and all that sort of stuff. If you're a little more technologically advanced, you'll have me electronically file this extension, and then you'll just go online to irs.gov and click on the payments tab and just make an extension payment through their online portal there. So definitely a couple different ways to do it, depending on how you like to operate. So that's the form there. You could kind of just see in the form, it's a lot of basic stuff: your name, your address, where you live, your social security numbers. These lines 4, 5, and 6 here, we put in an estimate. Like if we went through and did your extension calculation, we'd have an estimated amount of tax due there, of your tax liability. We'd put in the total payments that you've already made, and then there would be a balance due with the amount that you're going to end up paying. So it's kind of a simple form, not too difficult, but something that we can work through if you want to. All right, let me kind of talk about the part that I think is going to be most informative when it comes to this kind of stuff, and that's the penalties that you could receive. And there's a lot of penalties that the IRS likes to put on people, but these are the 3 penalties that I kind of thought were the most pertinent to talk about. The first one's called the failure to pay estimated tax, and you might have heard the phraseology, "Hey, I have to file my quarterlies." Anytime people say that I have to file quarterly payments, that's kind of something that they may be referring to here. But it says, when you're a taxpayer that makes more than 150K if you're married, or 75K if you're single, if you make more than that and your tax liability is over $1,000, you're required to make estimated tax payments. And so I'll just give you an example. Let's say you make 200,000, you have a small business, and you're an employee of your own business, and you end up paying yourself a $60,000 salary, but you have another $140,000 that kind of goes untaxed throughout the year. What'll end up happening, and let's just say on that 160,000, for round numbers, you needed to make another 40,000. The IRS and myself, we would prepare these vouchers for you so that you could make a $10,000 payment per quarter. Now, if you chose not to pay those $10,000 vouchers, then the IRS would penalize you, all right, for not making those payments throughout the year. This is just their way of getting the money throughout the year, instead of everybody kind of waiting till the following year to pay their taxes. So the requirement to avoid the penalty is that you pay 110% of your prior tax due. And that's just a general rule. If you did owe that 40,000, if in the next year you paid 44,000 in estimated payments, you would not have a failure to pay estimated taxes. That's just 10% over the 40,000. All right, if you decide not to pay the penalty is calculated by days and the amount that you should have paid. So there's a calculation that goes into it. The interest rate or the penalty rate is very small. It was like 0.003 and some change. So it's not a huge penalty. So, oftentimes a lot of my clients don't even really worry about that penalty if they want to hang on to their cash. And you're going to have and I think it's really important to kind of spell this out, but you're going to have two types of people here. Person number one is going to be like, you know what? It's a small penalty. It's a few $100. I can do way more with my 40,000 in the market and with investing in real estate and different things like that. I'm just going to take my penalty instead of giving Uncle Sam the money up front. That's going to be one type of person. Then you're going to have the other type of person who, makes a couple 100,000 a year or whatever. And if they see this penalty on their tax return, it's going to drive them nuts. They want to avoid penalties at all costs. And so, for me as the CPA, I need to try to get an understanding of what your personality is in that regard, and make sure that we kind of put this together so that you avoid those penalties, because they can be costly. I mean, if you're somebody that makes seven figures out there, failure to pay estimated taxes can add up if you should have been paying a lot of money. So kind of know your personality on that, and then communicate that to me, and we'll make sure that you're avoiding those penalties if need be. So that's the failure to pay estimated tax. And one thing that I'll point out with that right now, I think that's pretty important, is right now a lot of people have been getting unemployment money and maybe haven't been having taxes withheld on that. A lot of people might have small businesses, Schedule C disregarded entities that are just sole proprietorships that they're making money on and not paying any taxes. If you're in that situation, if you're in that boat and you need to, kind of try to get an understanding of how much you should be setting aside, feel free to just shoot me a message on that. I'm happy to just kind of give people a rough number of what you should be holding aside. That's not too hard for me to help you figure out. So, just keep that in mind. Now, in 2020, usually these estimated tax payments are due in April, June, September, and then January. Okay, that's when these quarterly payments are due. The April payment was actually pushed to July. So this year it's kind of weird, but it's June, July, September, and then January. So, a lot of people have been hanging on to cash this year just to, kind of see what was going to happen with the economy. And I totally don't blame you at all for that. But if you're kind of sitting there right now and you're like, Ronnie, I'm kind of freaking out. I haven't really made any payments this year. What am I going to do? What should I do? Feel free to reach out to me on that too. We can definitely get that worked out. I'll give you a little trick of the trade that could work out a little bit decent right now. Let's say you haven't filed your taxes yet and you're an extension filer. One thing that you could do to get a little benefit here is you could make a larger extension payment than maybe you are than you really need to make. And what'll happen is when we do your taxes, whatever your overpayment is, you can apply it to the next year, and it'll be considered a Q1, just like a Q1 payment. So, I'll give you an example. Let's say you do your taxes and you owe the 40,000 a year, okay? And you should be paying the 10,000 a quarter, and you're just kind of like, hey, I've never done it. I didn't really know I was getting penalized for this, for not doing it. What should I do? What you could do is right now you could make a $60,000 extension payment with your taxes, and it'll cover the 40, and then you would get a $20,000 refund that you could have applied into the next year. So just kind of a little trick of the trade. I mean, I'm going to do that with a couple people that I know, and you just have your overpayment applied to the next year, and you for the tracking of this payment or this penalty here, for those purposes, you get a Q1 payment for your full overpayment, even if you are 6 months into the year right now. So just a little trick of the trade there. Failure to file penalty. This is the worst penalty. I really hope that anybody who's listening to this does not get this penalty. But this penalty is 5% of your unpaid tax, and that amount is per month for 5 months. So, let's say you owed that 40,000, since I'm using that number. If you ended up not filing your tax return, let's just say, you know what, I blew it off, I didn't get to it, I didn't want to pay the accountant, whatever the excuse is, right? If you owed that 40,000, and let's say it's November and you're like, oh shoot, I need to get to it, okay? And we file your return in November, you're going to get a 5% penalty on the 40,000. Let's just call it 1 month, and that's a huge penalty, okay? And so you definitely don't want to get a $2,000 penalty per month for not filing, plus the other penalties that are going to get tacked onto this. If it drags on 5 months, you got a $10,000 penalty. I mean, this is the worst penalty, is failure to file. And so what I always tell people is, even if you can't pay the amount that you owe, just get it filed. It's best to get the return filed. That way you're not tacking on this penalty here. So failure to file, avoid it at all costs, and just make sure you get that return filed. All right, failure to pay penalty. This is a pretty common one, okay? This is when you're gonna end up doing what I just said. You file the return, but you don't pay. All right, so you get a 0.5% penalty of your unpaid balance per month. That's why I say file even if you're not gonna pay, because this penalty is 0.5% instead of 5% per month. So you're gonna get a 0.5% penalty per month, okay, if you don't pay by July 15th this year. So let's keep using our example. You owe 40,000, all right, but you can't pay by July 15th. So you let that roll a month, okay? Now your penalty is a couple $100, okay, instead of 2,000 bucks, okay? So July 15th is our date, and a lot of you guys might be thinking, I'll take a couple $100 if I can extend it out to October, because I could make more money with whatever else you're doing, and I totally get that, and that's fine. Half my clients take the penalty, maybe even more than half of my clients take the penalty, because they think they can do better, and they do better usually. But and they like to have the cash flexibility. With everything going on with COVID right now, election year, we don't really know what's happening with some economic stuff. You might be sitting there thinking, you know what, I'm hanging on to every little bit of my cash right now, and I wouldn't blame you one bit for that. The maximum penalty on this is 25%, just like the other penalty, failure to file penalty is. And one thing to note that I noticed is that they'll apply a full month penalty even if you're just a day late on it. So make sure always need to make sure that we pay online on the day of the deadline. I don't really know how often they shake people down if it's a day late, but you always want to have your stuff postmarked or paid by your due date. So these are the 3 penalties. If you have all 3 of the penalties all together, it really adds up, especially when you consider interest. Interest is applied to all of these penalties, and it's about 6% a year. Okay, so 0.5% per month is kind of what that breaks down to. So these penalties, we really want to try to avoid them if we can. If we have a great relationship, it really is pretty easy to avoid them. If you're in control of your tax situation, it's kind of one of these things that we're talking about and we're on the same page with. It's pretty easy to avoid these penalties if you really want to. But again, I always have somebody who says, Ronnie, I didn't know about the penalties, and I always make sure that I do a webinar or something around this time of year, around deadline time, to really try to remind everybody that there are these penalties that are out there. But like I said, you know what, I'll kind of go back to the slide. What's an extension calculation? If we go through and we put in the software everything that we know, and we estimate on some of the other items that we're waiting on, we can get a pretty good idea of what you're going to owe. And then what we do is we make a payment to cover whatever you are going to owe if you want to do that. And when we make that extension payment, it wipes out and takes away all the concern about any of the penalties. So, you know, the main things I want to highlight with this is over the next 10 days, we're going to be pretty busy doing the returns that we have in house. A lot of people have gotten us their stuff. If you're sitting there listening to this right now and you're like, oh, I haven't gotten Ronnie my stuff yet, or I haven't filed yet, or I need an extension, just reach out to us. I mean, you know, if it's one of these things where I need to pull a rabbit out of the hat because you really, really need to be done by July 15th, I'm going to do whatever I can over the next 2 weeks to really help people do that. If you haven't really gotten me your stuff yet, then, you know, there's no shame in filing an extension. I really say that over and over again. There's no shame in filing an extension. You know, nobody should ever feel that way. But, you know, we can get an extension in, we can get a calc done, you know, over the phone, and we can make sure that, you know, you're in good shape over the next few months. So I'm committed to that. I'm happy to help. I just want to thank you for listening to my webinar today. I want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July, and I hope everybody has a really great weekend. If you need to reach out to me, here's, you know, the office number and my email, which is probably best. But you know, if you're watching this on YouTube, would love for you to subscribe to my page. I'm going to keep doing more of these types of videos so that people can get a good understanding of, you know, what we're trying to do in this complicated world of taxes. So really appreciate you guys, love you guys, and hope everybody has a great one. All right, we'll talk to you later.